Malta, a maritime nation at the heart of the Mediterranean. For centuries, a bridge between Europe, Africa, and Asia. A reputable pioneer in global shipping and maritime services. Malta's Ship Registry, Europe's largest register. 6th in the world. Malta is a trusted global maritime hub where compliance, safety, and efficiency converge. Malta upholds the highest standards in maritime safety and security. From rigorous inspections to complete digital systems, the Malta Ship Registry ensures compliance and trust. Malta is driving digital transformation across the maritime industry. Ship certification is now fully electronic building on the digitalization of seafarer documentation. We also believe in a diverse maritime sector, most notably empowering more women in shipping and invest in training and skills for a new generation of maritime professionals. Malta's influence reaches far beyond its shores. As a home to key IMO institutions and a leading voice in international maritime law, we strive for more cooperation, innovation, and progress. Digitally driven, environmentally committed, and ready for what's ahead. This is Malta, Europe's Ship Registry. Globally trusted.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Marine Legal on Yachting International Radio. Today I have with me Dr. Lorna Mifsud Cachia, Managing Partner at Dingli Dingli Law Firm, and she will tell us a bit about herself, to introduce herself. And we will today be discussing crew contracts in yachting, especially, and the different rights and things to look out for. So thank you for being with me today, Lorna.
It's my real pleasure. We're here in this beautiful Valletta location as well, with the beautiful bastions behind us. Thank you, Jessica, for this lovely opportunity. It will be my pleasure to speak to all our listeners about and to show our listeners how important it is to be on the lookout and what to be aware of, all the elements which have to go into an employment contract.
So I just would like for the listeners to know a bit about yourself before we start. If you could just give us a bit of a background, Lorna, please.
Well, I'm a managing partner at Dingli Dingli Law Firm. I head of Department of the Litigation Advisory and Advisory Department, which includes also employment law, privacy law, GDPR, and litigation. And in my career, I've been a lawyer for almost 20 years now, which also shows how old I am, which it's not a state secret anyway. So, and in my career, I have had occasion to look into many relationships between employer and employees in various contractual relationships, including, of course, those on pleasure yachts and generally vessels.
Yes, and so mainly what I would really like to start with is to see what the parties should look out for in the contract before engaging the employment, the crew member, before starting the employment. Are there any essential aspects that definitely need to be seen in the contract of employment?
That is a very interesting question. And I could, I think, spend 5 days talking about it interruptedly, but I'll try to be very brief and succinct. But I think the first element which parties need to be very aware of is who the parties to the contract are. We come across at the point of litigation, when it's then a tad too late, we come across situations whereby from reading the contract, the agreement, you cannot even understand who the employer is and sometimes even who the employee is. Why? Because the first thing which two parties to a contract need to be clear about is who they are. So we have to have, on the one hand, the employer who is clearly identified, and on the other part, the employee, not anybody, not, just a designation. We are employing a seaman and that's that, or a seafarer and that's that. And we've seen these cases. So this is not something which is, written in law books. What we're talking about today is just from practice. We've seen, for example, instances where 3 names of employers who are not employing jointly, but they are listed sporadically, the agreement is peppered with different names of employers just because, of course, there are different interests in the vessel, in the yacht. But it so happens that if you have litigation, you have to understand who the employer is if there's responsibility. You have to understand who the employer is. And also, in the normal course of things, even if there's no litigation, the employee not only has the obligation to know, of course, but also the right to know who his contracting party, who his employer, her employer is. And one of the things we always ask, and it's a very delicate element of a contract, who is the employer? Because sometimes we come across a name of the vessel being the employer, or else a name of an individual, when the real employer at law would be a company. So the key question here, and I would advise all our listeners to be wary of that and be very aware of who the parties are. How do we know who the parties are? And how do we know who to mention in the agreement? Let me here open a little parenthesis. I always advise that before entering into an agreement, parties consult legal advisors. I know there's a lot of AI templates nowadays, and it's good to try to run a few ideas through AI, but ultimately, the hand of the professional and the mind, even more so, of the professional has to be there, because there are elements which no AI system to date can, advise upon, and there are elements which we become aware of as lawyers only through practice and, of course, through our studies and our experience. So when we are talking about agreements, I do not want to come across as advising people not to consult lawyers and do a DIY job. I'm not trying to increase workload of lawyers. What I'm trying to say is that we have to invest as seafarers and as owners in our own safety and peace of mind by consulting lawyers. Why? Because there are many traps which can befall an owner or an employee on board the vessel with respect to the employment agreement. One such, trap or one such element could be exactly the lack of proper identification of who the individual employing and who the individual being employed is. So the first thing is we have to see exactly whether it is a company, whether it is an individual, whether it is a group of individuals, and we have to identify that individual or company, what we call at law legal person or natural person, who should be named in the agreement as the employer. The second element we have to be very sure of is that the obligations of the seafarer and the rights of the seafarer be clearly spelled out. Why? Because many times litigation is not the result of bad faith. It can be, but we come across cases whereby litigation is the result of lack of clarity in who needs to do what and why.
Yes.
So you come across sometimes agreements which expect somebody to assume that, for example, a seafarer has to do tasks from A to Z, when in fact the agreement speaks of A to F and nothing else. Now, the law says, even Maltese law says, that we have to ensure that all the obligations listed in the agreement are performed also with all their accessory obligations. But sometimes even those accessory obligations are unclear, and hence the agreement has to specify exactly, clearly, and without any shadow of doubt, the elements which make up the obligations. Also, we have to ensure the rights of the seafarers and the rights of the yacht owner are properly safeguarded. How? By ensuring that they are drafted clearly and drafted in accordance with the law. So these are 3 elements which, so the parties, the subject matter, and also the clarity in the relative drafting. The subject matter, the relative clarity in the drafting, of course, applies both to the subject matter and also applies to the parties. Finally, and I close on this, we have to ensure that the agreement is properly executed. What do I mean? Sometimes clients send us agreements which are not signed. They think that just because they exchanged the drafts and they said, I agree, it is executed. Now, there's a lot of, ifs and buts on it. Of course, one can say you have joined the boat and so on and so on. But still, our advice is always to ensure that it is properly signed. What do we mean? It doesn't only mean that it has a signature, but it also means that the document is signed by the parties who are duly authorized by means of a resolution, if there's a company, or if the person is signing that it is really him or her who's signing.
Yes. And that they are duly authorized
and
to
that
sign
they are duly
on behalf
authorized
of whoever
to sign.
they are
Precisely.
acting. Yes.
So this is succinctly put common to all agreements.
Yes.
Let me be very clear. But in the context of a seafarer's agreement, it's even more important and compelling to have these elements because we always say that in the maritime setting, everything is far more onerous because, of course, the risks are far more serious and far more may attract far higher liability than on land. So it's very important that these little tiny elements which together make up the contract, a proper contract, not be overlooked by the persons entering into the relationship.
Yes. And Lorna, are the differences whether you are being engaged on a private yacht or a commercial yacht? And also, does the flag state make a difference too?
Of course. So the flag state makes all the difference. If we look at Malta as a flag state, for example, we know it's very serious in the enforcement of seafarers' rights. We also know that it is a flag state which is chosen for safety and peace of mind of both the owners and the seafarers. Now, anybody might fall into the sort of temptation of thinking that if it is a flag state which is safe for the seafarers, then it is unsafe for the owners, or that it is unfavorably, weighed in favor of the seafarer. Nothing could be further from the truth. Why? I invite all our listeners who may be yacht owners, who imagine themselves being at the mercy of an unscrupulous seafarer, or of a seafarer who just wants to get on board to, without any responsibilities, without any obligations whatsoever. The situation, and we've had cases like this because, as we said at the beginning, we are talking about our experience. You may have situations whereby the crew member is almost criminal as to the level of negligence he or she show in the performance of their obligations. So when you have a serious flag state such as Malta, you have the peace of mind that you're attracting serious people. Because, of course, even if the flag state ensures that the seafarer is not being abused, it also ensures that in the way that seafarers are also protected, it is also protecting the yacht owner. Because the yacht owner who is attracting serious and professional seafarers is automatically more protected and is automatically more, or it may be automatically more at ease, more relaxed, and ultimately has more peace of mind when he thinks of the seafarers he is employing on board his vessel, his yacht. So when we are talking about flag states, the choice should be one, in our humble opinion, should be one which ensures the yacht owners ultimately safety and peace of mind. This is where the importance of a serious flag state such as Malta comes into play. It is also important to know that Malta, as a ship registry, also has a unit which is dedicated to giving assistance and information to seafarers. So as you do not get, as a yacht owner, unfair claims, for example, during the voyage itself, or you do not get unfair expectations after the signature of the agreement. You will not have a ship registry which is intent on giving false information to seafarers to try to, make unfair claims or make undue pressures on on yacht owners. So it is a delicate balance between expectations and obligations and rights on the one hand, but then the peace of mind of the yacht owner on the other hand. And let's face it, what higher value do you want at sea than peace of mind? It's one of those areas where, like aviation in a way, but even in seafaring activity, peace of mind has always been, and still is, and will always be, one of the elements which unconsciously and subconsciously vessel owners, yacht owners, and even perhaps their passengers or their family members who are using the vessel, but also seafarers seek to achieve in the entering into the relationship. And ultimately, nobody purchases a yacht wanting to be worried that it will not make it safely to port. Let's face it.
Yes.
So these are all, having Malta as a flag state, for example, will give a further guarantee that you are in safe hands.
Yes, and Malta, being a party to the Maritime Legal Convention, also sets the same limits that the MLC requires when it comes to ensuring seafarers and their rights to health and their rights to repatriation in case then there's termination of contracts and the crew member needs repatriated. So I do understand that the law sets certain basic requirements, whether the boat is private or commercial, but then also it is up to the seafarer and the employer to ensure that both parties know their rights, both at law and any negotiations they wish to discuss and agree on over and above the limitations set by law, right or not?
Precisely.
So do you have, let's say if it comes to employees on a Malta flagged yacht in the south of France, and the boat is private, which could at times switch to commercial, do you have any advice to the parties to an agreement relating to that type of yacht, please?
So let us first of all make a distinction.
Yes.
Regrettably, and I say regrettably with a specific purpose, private yachts do not have, that is, to be even clearer, yachts which are only used for one zone, in one zone course of leisure activities or just to enjoy it, There are no there is not an onerous obligation on the owner as much as if it were a commercial use yacht.
Yes, carrying passengers.
So carrying passengers or even, or even chartering, for example, that sort of thing. So we are in the situation whereby a private yacht owner can pretty well choose to a certain degree the level, for example, of insurance or protection they give to their own seafarers. So first of all, and now I turn to seafarer, a seafarer needs to understand whether, and probably he will be told by the employer, whether the use which will be made of the vessel will be either commercial or private. Now, if it were to be both, the owner would be well advised to ensure that he is always covered by the provisions and that he is always abiding by the provisions of the Maritime Legal Convention, which also stipulates, for example, that a seafarer has a right to repatriation, that a seafarer has a right to an element of sick leave allowances and how to deal with certain situations which can arise on board. But there are other issues which are very serious in my view, particularly with respect to private use yachts, for example. The issue of sexual harassment on boats, on the yacht, whilst they are, for example, out at sea between different seafarers, or sexual harassment between the crew member and the yacht owner, or even elements of criminal law, and I believe we will be tackling criminal law at a later stage.
In another podcast,
Yes. So there will be issues which ideally are tackled at the moment of, or rather before the signature of the employment agreement. And this is very important, Jess, and thank you for raising it. We said what should be on the lookout for. We need to understand that once the agreement is signed, the seal is their fate is sealed. Why? Because it is difficult then to change something. It is before the actual signature of the agreement that parties should look into these things.
Yes.
And when we say parties should look into these things, even employers looking on how to protect themselves, in certain cases, even through proper insurance. Now, of course, the hull has to be insured and there are elements which need to be insured, etc. But we need to remember that a ship owner, even though is not perhaps obliged at law under the MLC, he is still an employer.
Of course.
And if we are looking at employment law, sic et simpliciter, so to say, without the obligations of the MLC, we are still looking at the employer having to provide, for example, a safe system of work. The employer who has to ensure that sexual harassment on board the vessel does not arise. The employer who has to ensure that the safety of everyone on board is provided for not only in the apparatus and equipment on board the vessel, but also the legal and moral safety of the individuals.
Yes.
You know?
I could also mention that it might be a good idea to have a contact person on land available to be contacted 24/7 by any member of the crew, whether it's the captain or the crew, to report any wrongdoing. Because if sometimes there are any issues arising and they involve the captain is representing the employer very often, or the owner. So
Precisely.
there could be very awkward and difficult situations faced by crew, and if there is somebody
Precisely.
that they could freely contact and is available, who is biased to receive a complaint, I think that's important. So not only under the MLC provisions, but it would be something useful for parties to look out for, to have a clause in their contract really making clear who they could report to, whether the boat is private or commercial.
Precisely. Also because from a human element, I always like to give the human and psychological flair, because ultimately we're all humans, even on board yachts.
Yes.
The fact that the seafarer may have a point of reference with whom to air any such grievance. Of course, we can't have like a pity party, so to say, for any little grievance, because we've had cases like that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you may have a situation whereby it's better to address a frustration, a worry, a concern with somebody on land rather than have it erupt on board the yacht. Because as we said, a yacht is a confined space out at sea,
yes,
which may exacerbate certain issues which on land would be easily diffused. And we've had cases which ended even in litigation whereby even violence erupted on board the vessel because of something which could have easily been dealt with had the proper tools been in place. So we can never underestimate the feeling of safety of the crew for the overall safety of the vessel and of the owners and his family and his friends, perhaps even in the course of private use of the vessel. Because, as we know, a pleasure is also used for the pleasure of the owner and his friends.
Exactly.
So, and we need to ensure that all those dearest to us are well protected as well. And they say that lawyers are cynical. Perhaps we are. I can't exclude it. But we can't blame us either, because we see so many things. And it is because of this cynicism as well. Or rather, we try to ensure that everybody feels safe and has peace of mind, that we advise that there be these tools, even a person on board, as you very rightly said, Jessica, to ensure that the persons on board, the seafarers on board, feel that their concerns and their worries and their, even sometimes serious issues can be escalated and addressed even with somebody on land. That helps, definitely. That would be a good strategy also to mitigate risk of seafarers' discontent on board the vessel, which could then escalate to further serious issues.
Yes. Thank you, Lorna. So in this chat we've had today, we've seen how important it is to have a clear contract, clarity on the parties, the rights and obligations.
Definitely.
And also the importance of a reputable flag state.
Very important.
And
very important.
How important it is to see things before the contract is entered into, before it is properly executed, to avoid any problems arising later on.
Yes.
So this, I hope, is one of future and other podcasts that I will have with Lorna to discuss issues arising out of contracts. And in the future, we will also tackle the matters of social security and health and any crimes arising on board and how could those be seen to when it comes to legal rights. Thank you, Lorna, for your time.
My real pleasure.
Once again, I thank Samizu and Marina di Valletta, where we are today. Marina di Valletta is one of the Marin's quality marinas worldwide. And I also wish to thank Transport Malta and the Malta Ship Registry for supporting this podcast. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
Lorna.